Palestinians have the right to exist. Palestine has the right to exist. And, that became, the basis of how I looked at things. My analysis, my consciousness was kind of mixed at the time. I didn't have like a solid Marxist analysis, but I knew that to be true at least. And then what happened during my college years was I was trying to find myself and my identity. And that was also a time when I was becoming a little bit more of a liberal because this was the Bush years. And I felt like simply being anti-Bush was enough. I was slowly becoming more of like a liberal Zionist, or at least a liberal Zionism apologist in my like mid 20s or so. I didn't understand the contradictions there. The fact that I couldn't, really advocate for a better world for working people, where Israel is getting, hand over fist money from America and the European Union to do to commit genocide. It took me a while to reconcile again, those contradictions. And when I really started to move left again, when I started teaching and I started rediscovering a lot of my leftist analysis about how the school system was being dismantled and housing was being dismantled and how the whole neoliberal project was happening, well, I couldn't make an excuse for Israel, because Israel is the ultimate project in neoliberal identity politics. And for me to say, like, I don't accept that anywhere else in my politics except for in Israel, I could not reconcile that. And then I became a strong anti-Zionist at that point.
All right. And here we are. And welcome to the show, Kenzo Shibata. Kenzo, how's your day going, buddy?
It's going all right, Dan. Thanks so much. This is what happens. My wife's been very busy, and my child is at the grandparents', so I've been streaming a lot the past few days. I was just on Good Morning Comrade this morning talking about the political situation in Chicago with the mayor, with Jeff Barwa, Comrade Jeff. That was a lot of fun, so I'm excited to come on here and talk with you.
Cool. Real quick, what's going on in Chicago? Just the normal shit? Yeah.
We talked about Lori Lightfoot and the, kind of forced reopening of schools and the forced reopening of businesses, even though things aren't quite really safe for that. And kids aren't all, there's no kids vaccine yet. And, as it is, teenagers are just slowly starting to get vaccinated. So we talked about all the complications there, about how we built power through the CTU and the DSA and, other places, and how we formed coalitions of, more progressive organizations. So for the first time, in my political history in Chicago, like, I feel like we have a fighting chance against the ruling class in the city.
That's pretty based. Let's take him down. Yeah, let's do it.
My life's work.
Yeah. And Kenzo, of course, you're a returning champion. We had you on. You're the returningest champion. We've had you on the most, and of course, we invited you here in the spirit of building leftist unity, strength, and power, as always. Before we start to dig in, how about we give you the chance to give yourself the big shout out, Kenzo? Let people know what you do, where they can find you, and where you live. Chicago.
Definitely Chicago. I feel like that has become my internet brand. Whenever something is going down in Chicago, the other podcasters and streamers have me on. So I love to be everyone's guy in Chicago. That's, I've been doing politics in the city for a very long time, mainly with my union, the Chicago Teachers Union. And tonight, we're going to have a great conversation on Meet the Left at 6 p.m. over at Class Time, or twitch.tv/Class Time. Tonight we have Lois Weiner, who is a longtime friend of mine, comrade of mine, teacher union activist and educator and writer. And she has this amazing analysis of how power works in the giant labor bureaucracy. And I wanted her to talk about connecting that to the international question, because our unions support Israel, lo and behold. So I want to talk about that power structure there and how that plays out. And I'm going to have some spicy little insider stories from my time working within the labor bureaucracy, and, how any kind of questioning of the Washington consensus around Israel is just not a conversation you're allowed to have. And we're talking about organizations of working people. And instead of allying with the working people of Palestine, we often, as a labor bureaucracy, ally with the oppressors. So that's going to be awesome. Also, Janelle Jolly is going to be on. She has a podcast called What's Left to Do. And she's just awesome. She interviewed me a couple weeks ago. And I would say this was probably the lowest energy Meet the Left we had that night, because she interviewed me for 3 hours and I didn't realize how draining it would be. So that night I was a little bit off my game, but we had great guests, carried the slack for me, and then, your production. But Janelle she just has it. I could see her becoming a good voice in the left, because she's just a very conversational person and really good at getting people to talk about things they weren't planning on, so to say. Like, she's a good interviewer. Like, not just, when we hear podcasts, we often think of like four dudes yelling at the same time. Her podcast may be more like Barbara Walters, something of that nature. Like, I tell some stories in there that I've never told yet. So after she's done editing that, I'm going to share that around. And finally, Karthik Purushothaman. He is often a guest on the This Is Revolution podcast. He's a musician, a poet, leftist thinker, and has a very kind of thoughtful analysis on vaccine apartheid. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. So this is going to be a good conversation. In fact, only 4 topics, because I know everyone's going to go over.
Oh, wow. Yeah, good one.
I just know it.
Yeah. Okay. And for those who don't know, yes, Kenzo and Shibata and myself, Kenzo and me, we do the show every Sunday night. It's called Meet the Left. It's sort of like this show, but there's 2 more people, and Kenzo hosts, and I'm not really on the show. I'm just sort of in the background. Yeah. But it's not a debate panel. It's a discussion panel. And it's been a great way for me as a new leftist to surround myself with existing leftists that have been around the block, and I'm able to put myself in a position to listen to important voices. And I hope you all check that out too. Again, the link is in the chat. Class time will be on at 6 p.m. Central Time, so in about 5 hours. Yeah.
And then what you do, Dan, is so cool, because I've seen you've had a lot of those guests on your show, the Leftist and Chill show. So then you get an hour just with them and get to know them very well. The design of the show is we have, do 10 minutes for the topic on Meet the Left. And the idea there is that people don't have to be too concise, but they have to have a certain level of that. And then you just let them pull out whatever they want to talk about, and you get to really know them. So it's really interesting for me to watch, guests that have been on Meet the Left, where we kind of get to know them and then do a deeper dive with them with you.
Yeah, it's really quite symbiotic. I hope you don't think I'm like encroaching on your space.
No, I want all of these people to have a bigger audience. Yeah. I want these people to be out there. So I love it. I appreciate it. And then it's content that I want to watch. So it's win-win.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm really happy to hear that, actually. Okay, so Kenzo, you wanted to pop on today. You asked if it would be cool if you could join me, and I'm always more than happy to have you on. The door's always open. I'm so happy you reached out, and you wanted to talk about Palestine. We want to talk about Israel and Palestine, and you saw me, I think, right before the jump, before the interview here. I was reading this book that's available through Haymarket Books, a free ebook download. Palestine, I think, is a socialist introduction, something like that. And I was just reading about that and sort of educating myself about the history surrounding what's going on there. And you asked to come on, and you wanted to talk about your topic. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about my personal relationship with Zionism and anti-Zionism. You've been talking to a lot of people about their journey to finding leftism. So I it made me think about this, and I wanted to talk about it. And a lot of this is very much tied to my introduction to leftism and my identity, really. I've talked about this before about how I, discovered Emma Goldman because I was trying to learn more about my own Jewish history, my heritage. And, my junior high library didn't have very many books about Jews. And I just knew the name Emma Goldman was a Jewish name, and I took it out. And then I learned about anarchism and anarcho-communism through that. And the way I was raised, it was, I was, my mom's Jewish, and I would say I was raised Jewish. That was the joke I always make, that there's like a hyphen in there. So I didn't actually have a very hard stance on Israel at all. Like, my mom's advice about it was, don't ever go there. It's a dangerous place. And so, like, my analysis didn't go beyond that.
Not even to. You say don't even go there. I thought you meant like don't even talk about it. But yeah, don't go there.
No, not at all. Like, we talk a lot about politics, but like, don't physically go there.
Yeah.
And like, so I didn't think about Israel much. It never, and like, I don't have family there. My family didn't, flee there when we were fleeing Europe. We fled to other countries. So I just never had roots there. And so for me, a lot of my Jewish identity is tied to leftism, which, we're learning now. Like, if I were to go to Israel, I would be a pariah for many reasons, but one of which is that leftists are really looked at as being like scum amongst even like the liberal population there.
Wow.
Like, the liberal Zionists don't talk much about Zionism. It's like we don't talk about capitalism. It exists. It's just part of their life. So they might not be forcefully saying we support Bibi, but they're softly supporting it. But I never really had any of that background. Like, we were Jews, but we didn't belong to a congregation. And there was no indoctrination that I think a lot of people get from a very young age. A lot of young Jews do. So it was just interesting to me. So like, when I was able to like form my own opinions around it, and I was reading a lot of socialist newspapers, and they would do this analysis connecting, the Israeli occupation to everything that's going on, and connecting it to South African apartheid, connecting it to the entire rotten system. That was what I kind of formed my belief system on, that, this was an occupation. Like, thank God when I was looking for books about, Jewish history, I didn't pick up a book on Golda Meir or Israel. That could have, I think I would have arrived at where I am now, but it would have taken it would have taken longer if I had that level. And who even knows? Because that is some deep indoctrination that happens with the story of Israel. And I think with some good reason, at least initially, the trauma of the Holocaust, it surrounded people with so much violence in their lives, and this world where it was like kill or be killed. The first generation of settlers, I don't excuse them. I don't think what they did was good, but I kind of understand the psychology behind it. One of the exceptions I have, though, in 2021 or like in the mid 90s when I was forming my opinions, is that, it's not 1948 anymore. Like, we need to, Palestinians have the right to exist. Palestine has the right to exist. And, that became, the basis of how I looked at things. My analysis, my consciousness was kind of mixed at the time. I didn't have like a solid Marxist analysis, but I knew that to be true, at least. And then what happened during my college years was I was trying to find myself and my identity. And that was also a time when I was becoming a little bit more of a liberal, because this was the Bush years. And I felt like simply being anti-Bush was enough. And, I became more of a liberal. I think I voted for Kerry in 2004, voted for Nader in 2000, but Kerry in 2004. And I was slowly becoming more of like a liberal Zionist, or at least a liberal Zionism apologist in my like mid 20s or so. And I didn't understand the contradictions there. The fact that I couldn't, really advocate for a better world for working people, where Israel is getting, hand over fist money from America and the European Union to do just to commit genocide. And it took me a while to reconcile again, those contradictions. And when I really started to move left again, when I started teaching and I started rediscovering a lot of my leftist analysis about how the school system was being dismantled and housing was being dismantled and how the whole neoliberal project was happening, well, I couldn't make an excuse for Israel, because Israel is the ultimate project in neoliberal identity politics. And for me to say, like, I don't accept that anywhere else in my politics except for in Israel, I could not reconcile that. And then I became a strong anti-Zionist at that point. And I got to admit, like 10 years ago or so, it was scary to admit that to people. I'd be called a self-hating Jew. I mean, that still is happening, but it used to be the vast majority of voices. So it took a while for me to like be very vocal about that, and now I'm, unashamedly pro-Palestine.
It took you so long to become an anti-Zionist, but it only took me a week, Kenzo. No. What do I want to say? Like, I was thinking about this morning, and even though I'm like a week into this, I'm hearing that, I'm hearing anti-Semite, and I don't take it seriously. It doesn't sting. It doesn't sting. And do we think that's representative of just me, of the conversation in whole is changing? Like, does that attack, that straw man, does that still have the sting that it had 10 years ago? Probably not the same for you. I don't know. But is the whole conversation changing? Is what I'm wondering.
It is definitely changing. Yeah. Like,
so there's a shift.
I was thinking recently about like the force the vote thing and how people were using that as a litmus test for like which politicians we can work with or which politicians are adding value to the world.
Yeah.
And, my bottom line now on force the vote, it happened, it's not going to happen again. You cannot make that the litmus test. It might, if you got the education out of force the vote that the Democratic Party is not on our side, even the most progressive ones aren't necessarily going to work in coalition with us to make structural change, then that's a good education. But then what you got to do is you got to get out of talking about force the vote and do a little political education about the Democratic Party. And I was just looking for a copy of the book I have, but right here. This is a Haymarket book, Democrats. I'm sorry, it's a dirty copy. I've used it a lot over the years. The Democrats, A Critical History by Lance Saifa. This breaks it down. This breaks down how the Democratic Party operates and how it's structured very differently from the Republican Party. In that the bottom line that Lance puts in the book is that the Democrats are capitalism's second favorite political party. So like basically, if you can't get the Republicans to force through some sort of neoliberal agenda, the Democrats will be happy to push through 90% of that same agenda and then remessage it to make you think you're voting for something that's going to be good for you. So like if that's what you get, the second book you need to buy is Christopher Hitchens' No One Left to Lie To. That's a quick, easy read, and it's beautifully written. It's about the Clinton family. And that's another way of like understanding how the neoliberal project was sold to America in the 90s. So I mean, that's my advice to people who are like still harping on force the vote is like, if you still want to be a part of this movement, learn a little bit more and find other ways to leverage power, build and leverage power. But what we saw out of the quote unquote media construction of the squad, those members, is that they're speaking loudly and passionately for Palestine. And we cannot lose sight of the fact that one term ago, the last Congress, you didn't hear that. And now we're starting to build people that are going to question empire and talk about Palestine. And sure, it is just talking, but at this point, that's more than we've ever had. And the fact that there's not, you can't just up and cancel people now for standing for Palestine. That says a lot, and it says progress. And these are little ways that those people that we put in Congress are are leading and doing things. We're not going to change society through a parliamentary procedure, but we're going to do it through culture. And I think that what they're doing is they're adding. And if you look at AOC versus Joe Crowley, maybe AOC's voting record isn't much different than his. And a lot of her critics will say that. And, that I could agree. However, she is adding some value that he was not. She's standing up for Palestine. She's doing these mutual aid projects where Congress is falling short of actually giving aid to people. So, we have to be very realistic about, the litmus tests we have for the left. And, force the vote wasn't that, but, let that take you somewhere, let that take you to a more hopeful place as opposed to, despair.
All right. Of course, I have a motorcycle right outside the window here.
Is that yours?
It's not my motorcycle. No.
It's your ride?
I'm not that kind of cool guy.
Is that the Sons of Anarchy guy from Abby Martin's documentary?
He's right outside. He's got a lot of words to share with me. He caught my stream. He wasn't happy with it. Okay. Where do we go from here, Kenzo? We've talked a bit about your your journey to anti-Zionism is tied to your intro to leftism. One of your heroes, Emma Goldman, was part of that journey, and you realized that your Jewish identity is also tied to leftism. Which I when you were saying that, it made me think of the kid who's co-founder of the quote unquote New Zionists account on Twitter, and he says something like, I think he was referencing perhaps AOC or the Squad and their support of Palestine, and he's saying the progressives are pushing young progressive Jewish people out of our movement. What do you think about that?
Oh, I definitely have a take on that. Well, one of the things about Judaism is that a very central concept for us is called tikkun olam. And I might butcher the etymology of it, but basically the concept of it is that we come into the world and the world is broken. And it's our job to put the pieces together. And that can be interpreted many different ways. To me, because I didn't have that layer of Zionist indoctrination, I'd say early on, I was able to have that apply to the organizing that I do and teaching and all that other stuff. But what the right-wing Zionist Jews might interpret that is they're putting the world together is, settling Israel. And weirdly enough, that's where the Christian and evangelicals come into play, because they want us all to be on Israel for the rapture. And the right-wing the right-wing pro-Zionist Jews, they are more than willing to work with these evangelicals, I think it's called the Canary Project, which, they would dox Palestine activists, particularly Jewish ones, because, we're all self-hating. They were funded mainly by the evangelical right. And they're on some 7-head shit with the idea that they're bringing on the rapture. But, we have very rational Zionists who understand that Israel is a geopolitical project, basically using Canary Mission to fund some of these propaganda campaigns. And one of the things they found is they were going to college campuses and trying to organize young Jews against the anti-Zionism movement. And they couldn't find any volunteers except for the Christian evangelicals. Those are the only people on these college campuses who are passionate enough about it. And because on college campuses, Palestine solidarity is a lot stronger than it is out of the campuses, and they see that as a threat. And that was exactly what happened in the 60s with the counterculture there, where the right wing and the state, conspired to break up these student movements because they did see them as being the next generation. And I think the Zionists did a real shit job over the past few decades trying to sell their bullshit to the next generation. And that's why they're in a crisis right now, at least in the West, about supporting Israel, because we don't have really a layer of young people who are gung ho pro-Israel.
You're saying here, like kids are generally coming around to pro-Palestine. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was checking in
either they're pro-Palestine or like mostly like kind of not strongly political about it, but understanding that Israel is in the wrong. Like people are finally opened up to that. The moral panic around being called an anti-Semite by being pro-Palestine is wearing off. They didn't really re-strategize that for a while. I feel like the Zionist movement, as far as like propaganda in the West, they had things like the Birthright program where they would send young American Jews to Israel to gawk at hot IDF soldiers and maybe have sex. It was like sex tourism. It was, you talk to people about Birthright, they tell you about how they got laid. They do not tell you about anything else, but it's a way of indoctrinating our youth into thinking Israel is this place of these beautiful people. You go there and you defend this country that is, ours. And what that does is, for people that are maybe moderate to pro-Zionist, that works. That's a good that's good propaganda. But to people that don't really feel a stake in it in the first place, people are less religious too now. It's a harder selling point. And, Birthright is only one plank in the whole thing, but it's the same kind of general idea, getting American and British Jews excited about being Israeli, about being, this is like, oh, here, you're exotic, it gave you a little bit more cachet to identify like that. And it's just not something I think young people are buying so much anymore. And it's not to say that like it's overwhelming support for Palestine happening on college campuses, but it's not the airtight fear of retaliation that used to exist. She's always going to be like a 23-year-old to me. I'm never going to imagine her as an adult.
Fuck, I was muted that whole time. But yes, this is Paris Hilton's take, and she's not exactly young exactly, but she's young in mind. She's young in thought, and here she's she is. Does this represent PMC this represents the shift, right? Coded. She's youth coded.
Yes. It's actually a band called Youth Code. Now that I think about it, good band.
Good band. So. Yeah, and she's not exactly young, but I think a lot of people will see that.
I mean, she's got a doctor that's going to maintain that she's going to be young for a very long time.
Yeah. It's in her best interest. That's her brand. You're Chicago. Mm-hmm. You're the Chicago guy. I'm the guy that knows leftist peoples, and she's forever 21.
Oh, that's good branding.
That was just right.
Actually, that was the branding there, is that it was Forever 21 was marketed to like late 20s people because you want to be Forever 21.
Really works out. That's a great brand because you get the 13-year-olds, they want to be 21. The 28-year-olds, they want to be 21. Great. It's fucking brilliant right there. Brilliant. Except the 21-year-olds. I bet they just stopped shopping there. All right. This is not a comedy show. And for good reason. This is for good reason. Okay, so we got this.
Although that's why they hired 21-year-olds to work there. It's part of their branding.
I see that. Yeah. So we've talked about how the squad's a little bit more vocal in favor of Palestine. We've never seen that before. And you mentioned the need for more realistic litmus tests. And I wonder what you mean by that on the left. What kinds of litmus tests are we thinking of? I do the show, the interview show, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what kinds of tests should I have, if any? I'm trying to also reach across the aisle a little bit, not a whole too much, maybe to a sock dim or two, as long as they're not too debatey. But I don't know. I'm just sort of throwing that out there. Maybe this fits in, maybe this ties in, maybe it doesn't. But what kinds of litmus tests should there be, if any?
I don't like the idea of like a static litmus test that we always have. I mean, there's certain things like don't be a fucking Nazi is my standard litmus test. If if I dunk your finger into the water and the litmus paper says you're a Nazi, you're not going to be my friend. But as far as like the force the vote thing, I don't want to necessarily harp on specifically, but like if a politician doesn't vote the way you want to once, just going on social media and saying, well, this person's canceled, they're not part of the left, does zero. It does zero. In fact, it maybe does less than zero, because what would really push politicians is if like you can organize around whatever issue is important to you, build a power base that can get these people unelected, and then show up and say, this is what we want you to do. Get a coalition as big as possible when you're going to do that. And I don't care if your congressperson is AOC or Mike Quigley, the guy here that my congressman who doesn't do anything, just a very moderate human who doesn't stick his neck out for anything. I don't know if he believes in anything. Either way, that's the same praxis you need to use. And you have to be strategic, though. Like, for example, AOC, you can maybe come at her from the left on an issue if you really want her to push, because that's part of her brand. And to then say, well, I have this coalition of people that can give money to your opponent or, en masse vote for someone else, that's going to move her. And what that means is, you need to be organizing in your backyard, but then also building networks of these organized communities. So, you might not live in the Bronx, so you have no connection at all to AOC. But you have a network then that maybe has connections to people there. And this network could be based on, let's say, Medicare for all. That's how you show power. And then if, let's say a particular tactic is important to you, you can't just sell that to your online friends. You have to sell that to people with actual power. AOC might not have known anything about force the vote through the whole time. It might not have ever hit her desk. But if you had some people that were in her community, and I mean not like a Discord community, I mean like people who vote in the Bronx and Queens, you could put a scare into her. But what's even more powerful is you putting pressure on your member of Congress. And that person might be a Republican. You're still going to have to find a way to pressure them. And pressuring people by exposing where they land on an issue isn't enough, because the average person is not that politically literate. You have to really sell to people in your community that your issue is important and move them to action to put a scare into your elected representatives. And, we're better off having people like AOC and the rest of the squad in office. They're not going to lead us to socialism. They're not going to lead us out of capitalism. They can't. They're Democrats. But we as a movement can use our power to use them as tools to lead us towards, maybe not socialism, but, a more a kinder society.
So I'm picking up really important things right there. And it's reminding me a lot of that goes on in my online communities that I see people sort of acting like the pressure that they're putting on anyone in the community or anyone is somehow going to translate into, for instance, AOC forcing the vote or whatever that fucking means. Totally symbolic, by the way, as we know. But I don't know. What I'm trying to get at is that, like, I don't know. Like, what does that mean for the online community? Do we need to learn how to calm down in certain fucking ways? Otherwise, we're just going to be driving the wedge in the left more. Is that part of the problem? You say, force the vote could have actually been worse than it was good because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's driving a wedge in the left, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I always go back to Pascal Robert, that there is no left, that there's just leftists. And that could be very, that could be kind of a depressing statement, but I also feel like it's a very hopeful statement because we do have leftists. And we have more leftists now than my entire lifetime, probably even longer than that. And people are starting to get organized. So I'm hopeful, but we have to, I think, think more as coalition partners than as a unified left. Like the right wing definitely exists in this country, and the reason why I say that is Marjorie Taylor Greene will say the craziest stuff. And I don't care if you're the most moderate Republican or if you're like on her team, everyone will stand up for her. No one is going to let her get kicked out of office. No one is trying to quiet her down. Maybe Liz Cheney, but like, see what's happening to her. The right will, and the right is an actual coalition that includes people like the Koch brothers, like Congress people, like Jeffrey Epstein, like, there's, well, maybe not Jeffrey Epstein. He played both sides, but, the right wing has a power base and they will unite behind their people no matter what. And their agenda is to privatize everything, keep the country racially divided. Like they have a very specific agenda that I don't care if you're the most moderate Republican, that's your agenda. When it comes to, we talk about like from liberals to anarchists, like, the whole spectrum of the left, we don't have a common agenda. And the moderates that hold power, because the moderates do hold all the power. You got to read the book about Democrats. They will throw anyone to their left under the bus to hold on to that their power. And some of it is respectability politics and messaging in media, but even more so is they will protect the powers of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, GE, all these war manufacturers and other people that are doing awful stuff. So the capitalists have the power brokers on both sides, but on the right, the power brokers and even the weakest people, even the neo-Nazis and Proud Boys, they are all part of a coalition that will work in lockstep. We saw that very specifically with Trump when he said, step up and stand by. We don't have that on the left. Chomsky says something, and if it jives with voting for a Democrat, the Democratic Party loves Noam Chomsky for a hot minute, and they love Angela Davis for a hot minute. Angela Davis was someone that the Democrats wanted in jail, a few decades ago, but she saw it as harm reduction. And part of that, too, I think, is because as people on the left, we are kinder people. So, like, part of it, too, is that we don't, we will go towards harm reduction and move more to moderate space to stop the agenda from the far right. So since we don't really have a left, I think what I'd say is that we should all develop the way we want to develop and join movements that we're passionate about. When I first, I shouldn't say when I first, but a couple of years ago, I thought of DSA as being like a pre-working class party organization. And there's so much diversity of opinion within DSA. I don't think that's possible. I think we're a multipolar leftist organization. And what that means is that there's going to be some people within DSA who are going to be further on the left and those who are going to be further on the right. And, one of the concerns I have is that we aren't doing dialectics within the DSA. Like we are debating and clashing instead of talking about how can we make mutual aid work with union organizing? How can we like combine these to build power and like build praxis around things that we're all passionate about. So we'll all, organize as passionately as possible. If you're organizing for something for just a paycheck, I've done that before. It can be very disheartening and alienating when, your organizing isn't about where you want to go next. It's about where your boss is telling you to go next. So I think as leftists, we should be developing ourselves through political education, get ourselves involved in popular movements, understand how we build power. And then we can start having talks about leftist unity, about how we can coalesce around things. And I think there's also going to be anomalies that we just have to like jump on and take advantage of. Like when we took over the Chicago Teachers Union, there was a split within the ruling caucus of the CTU, and we took advantage of that. We're disciplined leftists with integrity, but at the same time, you got to use a political opening. And the last time I saw that from a broad leftist space was Bernie Sanders. And I felt like as leftists, we did a very good job with what we had and the limits of the possibilities there. And I hope we come across another anomaly like that in the future, where even though not everyone on the left was supporting Bernie Sanders, there was a critical mass. And I saw so many people that you would never expect stumping for Bernie, anarchists, people who are totally against the Democrats, totally against electoral politics, supporting him. So I think if we see some sort of common cause and power, an actual structure where we could build power around it, that's a moment where we're going to have to just dive in head first and do it again. But in the meantime, we should be developing ourselves and organizing within our communities.
All right, a lot of going on there. Good reminder of Pascal Robert, and of course, reminds me of his idea of class suicide that he brought up. It was a lot of fun. I think about that a lot. I know. I think about that one. That was a really good one at the end of that episode of ours.
It was also making me think about Israel a lot. I was thinking about that quote because, the misnomer that Israel is a democracy is part of its selling points. Mm-hmm. And you don't have a democracy when you have a piece of land with a lot of people on it and you are disenfranchising a group of people. Like, the idea of having a democracy is like everyone living here has a vote. Everyone living here has, the same, should be brought up with the same amount of political capital to a certain extent. And so it's not a democracy because it is austerity. You have Palestinians working practically slave labor to the benefit of the Israeli state, Israeli capitalists, which benefits Israeli state. And they have no political voice. So that's not a democracy. It's, genocide is also, this is genocide, but if you look at Nazi Germany, some of the options for rebuilding an economy, if you don't want to actually dismantle it, is genocide or austerity. It's taking money from the poor and giving it to everyone else. Mm-hmm. So you have this constant underclass and then a layer of people who are comfortable enough where they're not going to challenge the system. And I think Israel's very similar to that. And then, of course, in Nazi Germany, they did that by murdering Jews and other people, seizing their property, seizing their businesses, and then redistributing them to, approved of ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. Exactly what's happening in Israel right now. So, since there is no democracy there, it's not like an even-handed debate. It's, for them to contend that they're a democracy, they would have to enfranchise the Palestinian people. And the only way to do that is, giving them self-determination.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that we've talked about in the past week, Kenzo, was something that I've learned about, which is the BDS movement. Mm-hmm. Completely different from the BDM movement.
What's BDM?
Wait, hold on. Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
Are you thinking BDSM?
BDSM.
That's different, yeah.
It's a little bit different. So the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanction, as I understand, and please correct me if this doesn't ring true to you, but this is coming from Palestinians. This is what the Palestinians want. This is what they're calling for. So when we are trying to focus the oppressed in our arguments, this maybe could be at the center of it because that's what they want. Mm-hmm. And literally, this is something I learned about this week, and I think you were right there. You told me. You're like, it's this. So
it's bare minimum if you stand in solidarity with Palestine that you're involved in BDS, that you're boycotting, divesting, and whatever power you have to do sanctions on Israel, you can. And it went through this movement went through every level. Like at first, they laughed because they're like, how can you do damage on Israel? And the thing is that worked as such a wonderful propaganda of the deed is what it's called, where like it's propaganda, but it's through actually doing a political action and not just through disseminating messages, which is part of BDS. But what it is, it's very symbolic that, it's a way of, first of all, it's exposing the companies that do business with Israel. And it caused and I mean this in a very good way, it was divisive. It caused people to be polarized about the issue. Where like, oh, so, maybe you're a liberal Zionist. Well, do you still agree with the way Israel treats Palestinians? Well, you should support BDS. It should be something that if you have any heart for the Palestinian people, even if you're not an anti-Zionist, you should support BDS, because the idea is, well, we'll lift the sanctions and the boycott when things are monumentally changed. And it created a more than just a dialogue. And some firms actually do get hurt from it. And the big controversy is with accepting like Israeli academics to do conferences in America. So a lot of academic groups, this causes divisiveness and again, good divisiveness on college campuses when they invite speakers over here, and like, people will protest if they have Israelis come here, and like, and mind you, these would also be maybe Israelis who are anti-Zionist, because the idea is we are divesting from the Israeli academic world. So if you're an Israeli academic, you got to stop doing that, because all you're doing is feeding into the state of Israel. And, people want to make exceptions. They're like, well, couldn't they add to the dialogue? And it's just like, yeah, they can add to the dialogue if they stop fucking colonizing. And so everywhere it goes, it causes people to talk about it, and it causes people to pick a side. And most notably, all the people that once laughed at us doing BDS, they're writing all this legislation to make BDS illegal, which is a violation of the Constitution in my non-lawyer opinion. But for some reason, this is something that bipartisan support, almost unanimously passes wherever it goes. So this means like firms, pension, investment organizations. I'm not a bank person. They can't do business with organizations that are explicitly supporting BDS, which they know what they're doing, because it's very confusing. What if I owned a firm that just, I am in my heart not doing any business with Israeli organizations, but I'm not explicitly involved in BDS. What do they do? They search my Twitter timeline? Like, courts do shit like that. It's fanning the flames of moral panic, and it would have a lot more weight, I think, if people really did equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And I think what they're really trying to do is they're trying to push us back a decade or two into those dark days, and they're using all their political weight to do it. They're not going to use this political weight to give us health care or to give us, a Green New Deal, but this is where they're going to invest their time and money.
And it's to hold up the U.S. imperial hegemony. Just gives us a foothold in the area in terms of us saying, "Oh, we're supporting democracy. We support democracy in the area," but it's not. It's really just. And I've often heard people, especially when I was a lib, I would be like, "Oh, we just do it for the oil." I didn't really have the understanding that I think comes with sometimes comes with being a leftist, comes with a leftist education.
But that's a direct line too. We're doing it for the oil. Like, that's a good place to start, because even though there's so many machinations and the politics intertwine in so many other places, at the end of the day, it's about capitalism. And in that region, capitalism is oil.
All right. All right, so I got to say, Kenzo, we got about 2-3 minutes here nice. Before my next chat. How about we go ahead? And how about we wrap it up? I want to thank you so much for being with me today, Kenzo. If you want to, we can just continue this conversation. The door's always open. I'll fit you in anytime in between any interview. Let's go ahead
Whenever
and give
my
you.
family's occupied, I'm happy to jump on the Skype.
Absolutely. So Kenzo, go ahead and give yourself the big shout out again. What do you do? Where can people find you?
Please tonight, check out twitch.tv/classtime or classtime.gg if you're feeling spicy and want to go on YouTube. The chats are all coordinated. I use Restream so you all can talk. And in fact, I also stream it on my Facebook so you could talk to my mama if she happens to be on. She doesn't chat. She lurks. And yeah, tonight it's going to be a great conversation. We're going to be diving into Israel. We're going to be diving into education reform and the labor movement with some very smart people. So that's 6 p.m. Central Time. Dan's producing. So you know it's going to look good and sound good. And you know, jump in the chat and have a good time.
All right, Kenzo Shibata, we invited you in the spirit of building leftist unity, strength, and power. In that spirit, you're always a wonderful guest. Cannot wait for our next chat. Kenzo, have a good one. Peace
You too. Take care, Dan.
And solidarity. Thanks. We'll see you next time. Yeah. Kenzo. All right, that was Kenzo. Kenzo. Hey, YouTube. You're watching a clip from my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/iDanSimpson, where you can follow for free and subscribe for only $5 a month. Thanks for watching.